Hello students, welcome to Well Explained. I am again here with the remaining part or the concluding part of the chapter 11 class 7 science reproduction in plants. So students, today we are going to discuss about the sexual reproduction in plants. Now students, sexual reproduction in plants is the formation of new plants through the fusion of male and female gametes. Actually, sexual reproduction takes place when there are two parents involved, a male and a female. This is carried out by flowering plants only because flower is the main organ for reproduction. So this sexual reproduction takes place only in flowering plants, as flowers are the reproductive organs of the plant. Now flowers are of two types. First is complete or bisexual flowers. In bisexual flowers, as the name is suggesting, bi means two and sexual means sexes. The two sexes means both male and female sex, both sex are present in this bisexual flowers. They have all the four parts, that is sepal, petals, stamens and pistils. An example of bisexual flowers are hibiscus, citrus, etc. Now, second type of flowers are incomplete or unisexual flowers. Uni means one. If one sex is present, that means either they will be male or female. So they contain either male or female sex. Reproductive cells, they have only three parts. Three parts means sepals and petals. They are present in both the types of flowers, that is bisexual or unisexual. But in bisexual flowers, both stamens and pistils are present, whereas in unisexual flowers, either stamen और pistil is present, means दोनों में से कोई एक ही present होगा, दोनों present नहीं हो सकते because it is unisexual flower. Examples are papaya and corn. Corn means maize. Now coming to the parts of a flower, because sexual reproduction all has to deal with flower, so we should know what are the different parts of a flower. Coming to sepals. Sepals are the outermost whorl or the outermost part of the flower. They are usually green in color. Okay, you have seen these sepals when the flower is in bud form. So the green part that is above the bud is the sepals. They protect the flower in the bud stage. Next part is petals. Petals are brightly colored part of the plant, and actually these petals, they attract the insects for pollination. Petals are either they are brightly colored or they are sweetly scented, means या तो बहुत अच्छी खुशबू होगी या उसमें बहुत चटकदार colors होंगे, so that the insects they get attracted towards them and help in pollination. Now the third is receptacle. Receptacle is the stalk which is present, means जो flower की जो डंडी होती है, that is the receptacle. Stamen is the male reproductive cells, male reproductive part of the plant, and pistil is the female reproductive part of the plant. Pistil is female reproductive part. Now coming to stamen, because we have to talk about the reproduction. We are concerned only with the reproductive cells, that is the stamen and pistil. The stamen is the pollen producing reproductive organ of a flower. These pollen grains are the male sex cells of a flower. It has filament which supports the anther and anther which produces the pollen grains. You can see in this figure. Okay, this filament is there. This filament is supporting these anthers, and what is present in the anthers? Pollen grains are present in the anther. Next is the pistil, that is the female reproductive part of the plant. Pistil is the ovule producing part of a flower, and ovule is the female reproductive cells. The ovary often supports a long style topped by a stigma. The three parts of the pistil are stigma, style and ovary. You can see stigma, style, ovary, and inside ovary are present the ovules. Okay, you can see here. The mature ovary is a fruit and the mature ovule is a seed. Stigma is the part of the pistil where the pollen grain they falls. The pollen grain they falls. Okay, it is missed by me. On stigma, the pollen grain land, and here the pollen tube is formed and it reaches to the ovule and the fertilization takes place. We are going to study in the later slides. Now, what are petal, receptacles and sepals? You can see in this hibiscus flower, these green, okay, these green which are covering the bud, these parts are known as the sepal. The outer parts of the flower, often green and they are leaf-like, that enclose a developing bud, they are known as sepals, as I have shown here. These are the sepals. What is receptacle? This is the receptacle, means the leaf, the stem, the part of a flower stalk where the parts of the flowers are attached, that is known as receptacle. You can see in this figure. The sepals, green one are the sepals, these are the petals, and these petals, sepals and these stamens, and these are the stamens, and this is the pistil. They all are attached to this part and this is known as the receptacle. Now petal, the part of a flower that are often conspicuously colored, means they are beautifully colored or sweetly scented. Now the stamens, they are the male organs. Male organs. They bear anthers, that is they contain pollen grains which produce male cells or gametes. You can see this is the filament as we have studied earlier. This is the anther, and inside the anther what are there? Pollen grains. You can see in this. These are the pollen sacs having the pollen grains. Next is the pistil, that is the female organ. Okay. It is composed of stigma, style and ovary, and the ovary produces female cells or gametes. You can see the stigma, style and ovary, and inside the ovary there are ovule, and ovules are the female cells. You can see so many ovules inside the ovary. Now this is the whole cycle of reproduction. Mature plant, they flowers. When the flowers are there, pollination takes place. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. Once the pollen grains are transferred, fertilization takes place. You can see the pollen tube is formed from the pollen grains which is on the stigma. Pollen tubes are formed and the nucleus, the male nucleus is entering the ovary and fertilizing the ovule, and a zygote is formed. After that, fruits are formed. Inside the fruit, there are seeds, and from the seeds, new plants are grown. So this is the whole cycle or whole steps of the reproduction, sexual reproduction in plants. Now the first step in the reproduction, that is sexual reproduction, is the pollination. What is pollination? It is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a flower. Okay. It is the first step in the process of seed formation, as I have told you earlier. This pollination is of two types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Okay, it may be same flower or it may be different flower on the same plant. Then also it is self-pollination. Now, cross-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same kind. But the plants are different. As we have already studied that reproduction is among the individuals of same kind. So in this cross pollination also, the anther of one flower reaches to the stigma of another flower, but it should be of same kind. If it reaches to the stigma of another flower of different kind, then it will not fertilize the ovule. It will die over there because they are not of the same kind. You can see the types of pollination. Self-pollination, in which this is a bisexual flower. The pollen grains, they are transferred to the stigma of the same flower. This is also self-pollination. Plant is same but the flowers are different. This is also this is cross-pollination. In cross-pollination, the anther from one flower, they are moving to the stigma of the other flower. Okay, other flower of the same kind, but the plants are different. And this is, all these are naturally occurring. Okay, this one is artificial. You can see the pollen grains are taken from this flower. They are transferred to the flower, other flower of the same kind. This is pollination. Now, what are the agents of pollination? ये pollination होता कैसे है? The very first agent is the wind. The wind blows away pollen grains from the anthers of one flower to the stigma of another flower. Now, अब हवा तेज चली, pollen grains, because their pollen grains are very light, very small, they can be blown away with the help of wind from the anthers of one flower to the stigma of another flower. But the flowers which are get pollinated by wind, they have special features, and the features are they are small, they are not brightly colored, and they do not produce nectar, because all these things means brightly colored flower petals and sweet smelling nectar, they all are the features of the flowers which are pollinated by insects. Okay, and the pollen grains of the flowers which are pollinated by wind are, they are very light and they are produced in large number. Why in large numbers? Because जब विंड के साथ वो एक फ्लावर से दूसरे फ्लावर पे जाएंगे तो बहुत सारे pollen grains क्या है वो इधर उधर भी चले जाएंगे. It is not necessary कि all the pollen grains which have started from one flower they will reach to the other flower. So these are the features of the pollen grains. एक तो वो बहुत हल्के होते हैं जिससे कि हवा से वो उड़ जाएं. दूसरा they are produced in very very large in numbers. The examples of the flowers which are pollinated by wind are wheat, rice and maize. Next is pollination by water. The pollen grains are released into water and they are carried out by the water currents to other flowers. Obviously, this pollination by water happens in most of the aquatic plants such as seagrass and Wellicenaria. Clear? Now the third is the pollination by insects. Now we know insects visit flowers for nectar. Means वो जो sweet smelling substance होता है वो फूलों का रस जिसे कहते हैं उन्हें पीने के लिए insects flowers को visit करते हैं. Some pollen grains in this process when they are sucking the nectar of the flowers, some pollen grains they stick to the body parts of these insects. Pollen grains उनके body parts में, उनके wings में, उनके legs में they stick में चिपक जाते हैं. Now when these insects from this flower they sit or on the another flower, that means when these insects they visit another flower, the pollen grains fall on the stigma. Okay, in this way the pollination is done. But what are the features of the flowers which are pollinated by insects? First one is they are very sweet smelling. They have a very sweet smell, so the insect get attracted towards them. There are brightly colored petals, okay, for diurnal insects. Diurnal means जो दिन में रात में दोनों में निकलते हैं. Example rose and sunflower. For nocturnal insect means those insects which come out at night only. White or light green petals are there. Example jasmine and cacti. Jasmine आपने देखा ये देखिए white colored petals होते हैं. तो रात में जो insect निकलते हैं उनके लिए white और light green petals होते हैं. They are rich in nectar, means the flowers are very rich in nectar. Features of pollen grains, they are sticky. Sticky होंगे तभी तो वो insect की body से स्टिक करेंगे मीन्स चिपकेंगे. Now, pollination is done. The next step is the fertilization. What is fertilization? The process of fusion of male and female gamete is called fertilization. Now, after successful pollination, means pollination हो गया, pollen grain transfer हो गया from the anther to the stigma. The stigma secrete nutrients. Now, यहाँ देखिए ये pollen grain आ गया ये stigma के ऊपर, ठीक है. Now, stigma starts secreting nutrients and the pollen tube starts developing. The pollen grain absorbs these and start growing in the form of a thin tube which is known as pollen tube until it reaches the ovule inside the ovary. और ये कब तक डेवलप होता रहता है? जब तक कि वो ओवरी तक ना पहुंच जाए. You can see here. Okay, now once it has reached the ovary, then it releases the male gamete into the ovule. Fertilization takes place. Fertilization means the male gamete, it fuses with the female gamete. And what is formed? Zygote is formed. What is formed? A zygote. Okay. It results in the formation of a zygote. This zygote is a single cell. Now, after fertilization हो गया, तो ओवरी जो होती है, it enlarges to form the fruit. बढ़ती चली जाती है और क्या बनाती है? Fruit. The wall of the ovary becomes the fruit wall and जो ovules present थे, they become the seeds. A fruit may have one or more seeds. One seed as in the case of mango, more seeds as you can see in the case of tomato. The petals, sepals and other parts of the flower they usually dry up and fall off. जब fertilization हो जाता है तो अब इन parts का कोई काम नहीं है. Petals, sepals और जो भी और कोई अगर extra parts हैं तो they dry and fall off. Now what is fruit? The fruit is the seed bearing part or the ripened ovary of the flowering plant. Seed is the ripened ovule which contains an embryo and is covered by a protective coat. And what is germination? Once the seed is formed, the seeds are then sown into the soil. So the process by which the embryo in the seed, it becomes active and begins to grow into a new plant is called as germination. You can see this is a seed that is sown. First the root comes out, shoot comes out and the baby plant comes out. So this is the process of germination. Now once the fruit is formed and the seeds are formed, what happens? Seed dispersal takes place. अब ये seed dispersal is very important क्योंकि जहाँ पर fruit अगर present बना है, जिस tree पे plant पे अगर fruit बना है, seed तो उसी के अंदर है. अगर fruit वहीं गिरा और seed वहीं लग गया तो वो जो है नया जो plant आएगा that will not be able to grow. It will have competition with the parent plant. और सारे seeds अगर वहीं गिर जाएंगे तो soil तो उतनी है, nutrients उतने हैं तो competition बहुत हो जाएगा and they all will not be able to survive. So for this, seed dispersal should take place. So what is seed dispersal? The process by which the seeds of fruits are scattered. Scattered means they are taken to the other place. This is known as seed dispersal. Now dispersal takes place by several mechanisms. They are dispersal by explosion. It is as in the case of pea plant, castor and balsam. इसमें क्या होता है जब fruit mature हो जाता है, it dries and explosion होता है means फट जाता है and the seeds they are thrown to some distance. Next is dispersal by wind. This takes place in dandelion, drumstick and maple. Means when once the fruit is matured, it dries up and the seeds they come out and they are blown up by the wind. Next is dispersal by water as in the case of coconut and last is the dispersal by animals. These type of seeds which are dispersed by animals usually have fleshy fruits. Okay, they usually have fleshy fruits. So this seed dispersal is the process by which seed or fruits are scattered. Okay. Now this is all for sexual reproduction. Today we end with the chapter 11, Reproduction in Plants. Hope you all enjoyed the chapter. It was all clear to you. If you are having any query, you can drop it in the comment section. I'll try to solve out your queries. Thanks for watching. But before closing, you just subscribe my channel and press the bell icon so that whenever I will upload a video, you will get notification. Have a nice day. God bless you all.